Hey everybody, Jake here, and welcome to the first Bearded Gear podcast. I'm shooting this one on my camera, like I do all of my YouTube videos. I'm not sure yet whether I'll move to a different type of recording for these or what, but the plan is to host these not only on YouTube, where I have my channel and share all of my YouTube videos, but also on major podcasting platforms. So although I may hold up some knives at certain points in here as I talk about them, I'm going to try to make this a very listenable type of recording. I don't want it to be as visual based as my videos are, even though a lot of people already complain that many of my videos are not as visually stunning, that I don't show the knives as much as tabletop reviewers do and stuff like that. And maybe that's something I'll talk about for a little bit here. But I just wanted to kick off the podcast by explaining a little bit of where I'm at right now. We're here in the first couple of days of 2021. And I started my YouTube channel in 2020. It was March when I started that, when I was furloughed from my job, which I can now talk about a little bit more. I tried to be delicate about not talking about it too much because of the nature of what I did, but I have quit that job, and I'm just doing content creation now, both for myself on my YouTube channel and on Instagram, and then also for my wife, who's a content creator professionally and who has been doing that for years. And because she is the subject of the content so often, I have become her photographer. But yeah, so my most recent job pre-COVID, I was actually working with a fundraising company that worked mostly with elementary schools, and I led a team where we would go into schools for 2-week-long programs, and we would teach children leadership lessons while running a fundraising program that ended in some kind of a fitness event. Oftentimes it was a fun run, or sometimes it was like a dance party, and kids would raise money for their school, and simultaneously they would learn fun leadership lessons. And I'm somebody who's always liked opportunities to teach, and I obviously don't find myself short for words very often. Usually if I'm given a time limit on how long I'm supposed to talk, what's harder for me is staying within that time limit than reaching it. And so it was a fun gig for me for a while. I really got into that because I had a buddy who had been with that company, although in a different area, for a while, and before that I was in sales for a long time. I sold cars, and then ultimately I went into the aftermarket automotive industry, but always in sales positions. And a lot of that came from being a young adult with no college degree and a kid on the way and a wife to provide for, and I needed a way to make money that didn't require a degree, and sales is kind of that. And so I was interested in cars, and that's when I started in dealerships, was because I was really into cars my entire life, and just didn't like selling them, it turns out. And then the aftermarket scene was better. I liked that. I worked for a company that was part of the factory racing effort with the Honda off-road race team, and we made products that basically were bolt-ons for Honda showroom vehicles. And so we made vehicles like the Ridgeline and the Passport and the Pilot more off-road acceptable. And then we dabbled in components for the Civic and the CRV and stuff like that. And it was a fun gig. I was with that company for a couple of years. But when that kind of came to an end, I had wanted to get out of sales. I wanted to do something totally different. And that's where that fundraising gig came in. And I'd really only been doing that for a few months before COVID hit. And then when COVID hit, it was like I was furloughed pretty much indefinitely until schools were back on. And even then, it's like, if schools are back on, then are they allowing non-essential personnel, like a third-party company who does this fundraising program, to come onto campus? Probably not. So I went back to work for about a month doing virtual programs. I did it all via Zoom, which was weird, and I had to set up like this studio here at home, and it was this whole thing. And then, again, there was going to be another big gap in it. And then by the time they were like, all right, we're probably coming back in January, I'd kind of realized that I'd gotten to a really nice flow of A, being able to accept more work with my wife. She was able to accept more campaigns, and with me being available to shoot those photos, we could earn more through what she does. And then I'd also just gotten so engrossed in the content creation and my YouTube channel and all that, and now that my channel's monetized, it's not like it makes me a ton of money, but it's a side hustle. It does do something, and so I really want to grow that for the year of 2021, and I don't have any shame in saying that. I feel like there's this weird thing where a lot of people who are in the realm of content creation, when they notice that anyone might learn that they might be making money from it, that they feel like they have to defend themselves about that. And I just don't. It's what my wife has done for years, being an influencer, if you will. And so many people look at that as such a dirty term, and I think it's as dirty as you want to make it. I really like making YouTube videos. I really get a kick out of it. I love talking about knives and EDC gear and outdoor gear, and I have a lot of fun plans for the channel, and it's just what I want to be doing. And the reality is, for me to be able to make that content as much as I want to be making it, as frequently as I want to be making it, to be putting the time and effort that it takes to make as much of it as I do, I can't do that unless I allow myself to make money at it. And that doesn't mean that I have to sell out and that I can't be honest in my reviews. Like, being monetized on YouTube, it's not even selective about which gear I get that makes me money, right? Like, people aren't paying me yet to review their products. If I get to a point where they do that, then I just have to be open with both parties, the person who's providing the content and the people who I'm talking to about it, that A, if you're providing me this thing, I need to be able to be honest about it, even if you're paying me. And then to the people who are watching, that they gave this to me, and that I'm making sure, at being as objective as I can, that I'm still talking about it honestly as the object that it is. And that's, in my mind, that's really clear. I get that maybe for some people, they think about it a different way, but yeah, I'm really excited about 2021 and just pushing farther and harder, and I like the idea of trying to achieve growth, and I think that's a good thing, and I don't get why some people seem reluctant about doing that in content creation, whereas if they're working in sales, they don't feel weird at all about pushing for growth and trying to make more money. Like, that's looked at as a favorable thing in any other like business space, right? So it's just this interesting thing that I find myself getting into a lot of conversations with other content creators about. And yeah, I think it's possible to be objective and honest and to still have a lot of fun and honor my process while still also making money at it. In fact, it would be impossible for me to keep doing it long term unless I was open to making some money for it. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. But yeah, so for this episode, I just wanted to kick off with kind of how I am where I am now, and as I go through kind of the journey of starting this podcast and having a little bit more of like an open discussion type of forum here behind the channel, there will probably inherently be some of it that's a little bit behind the scenes. Like, I never talked in detail about working for that fundraising company before, and I'm open to using these more long-form conversation spaces to talk about those things. Every now and then I'll probably do a solo episode like this where I'll talk about things that are important to me in that moment, because my vision for this podcast is to have guests regularly, and I haven't decided yet how often I'm going to release podcast episodes. I'm thinking at first I'll probably do twice a month. I think that'll be a good flow, at least to begin with. And so each episode I want to have a guest on. And every episode that I have a guest on, it's important to me that I model it after the podcast that I like listening to the most. I think that's the best way to do it. The podcast hosts that I find myself enjoying the most are the ones that have interesting guests on, and they allow those guests to talk, and they guide the conversation for the guest. And like, I listen to the Joe Rogan podcast almost every day. It's one of the biggest podcasts in the world. I'm sure a lot of you listen to that podcast as well. And what I love about it is that I feel like over time, I've gotten to know Joe Rogan. That would probably be weird for him, right, if he met me, because I feel like I know him and he doesn't know me at all. But I feel like I have a pretty good read on what kind of guy he is. But that's not because he spends every episode jabbering about himself. He gives personal examples and stories to relate to the person that he's there with, but he's really good at conversationally asking questions and getting other people to tell their interesting stories, right? And if he wasn't, I'd be sick of his podcast by now, because I've heard all his stories by now, right? He's not having enough new experiences every day that he can talk for 3 hours a day and keep me captivated. But he's really good at finding a balance of learning from the person that he's there with, and thus allowing the listener to do the same. And so I'd like to strike some sort of a balance like that. I know I'm going to be very imperfect at it to begin with, and it's going to be a stretch for me to develop that new set of skills of being the interviewer, right? As you're probably well aware if you watch many of my videos, I've got no problem talking a lot. I do it constantly. In fact, I go too deep into the weeds a lot of the time, and I like to have the fun conversations that come in the comments afterwards. If you follow my Instagram, you'll probably see some of the screenshots I'll share when people are like just sharing their feedback completely unsolicited about how much I talk or any other thing. But it's true, I do oftentimes talk for too long, and so I'm looking at this as an opportunity as well to watch myself and how I convey my own thoughts, and that's something I'm always working on. I've always loved opportunities to talk, and I've oddly, usually, most cases in my life, kind of, I guess mostly in adulthood, I've looked forward to opportunities to speak to groups of people. Like even if I, at church, get asked to speak in front of the entire congregation for 15 or 20 minutes or something, like, I have an odd drive and like draw toward that, because not so much that I like hearing myself. In fact, I think my own voice kind of bothers me when I listen to it. But more so, I like the challenge of having to formulate my thoughts. And I'm kind of doing it right now as I'm explaining it. But I like the challenge of it being live and in the moment, one take or in front of people, to have to convey what I actually think or feel about something. That just feels really good to me when I'm able to get it out, and it actually sounds the way I meant for it to come across, and people understand something about me that they didn't understand before, or something about a subject that they didn't understand before, and I just get a kick out of that. And so I like the idea of my podcast kind of becoming something like that, both from kernels of information that it'll draw out of me, that hopefully will be valuable to somebody, not to sound too self-serving, but also from the people that I plan to kind of interview, although interview isn't even necessarily the right word for it, the people I plan to have conversations with, that the listener can then be a fly on the wall for. I hope that there will be a lot of valuable stuff that'll come out of that. And at least for now, it's going to be very knife and EDC focused, because that's what my channel is right now, and that's what my kind of passion at the moment in life is. And that's a passion that's always been there, so I don't see it leaving either. But it may develop over time to where I have guests that are in certain different niches that are close, but not exactly knives, or I don't know. I'm open to having conversations with a lot of different people, but there will be content creators, there will be makers, and like I said, every now and then I'll probably do one that's just me. That'll be a deep dive into a subject where I can just put my thoughts out there. And hopefully that's in some way interesting to watch or listen to, whichever way you consume it. But yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So that's kind of the plan for the podcast itself, and I think it's going to be a good time. Right now, I figured for the first episode, it would kind of be fun to talk about like the gear that I'm at in my life, and like where my price point for gear is, and what gear I'm finding myself really vibing with, and just kind of a snapshot of where I am. I think also within the next couple of weeks, I've got a few loaners that are out, so maybe when they come back, I'll do a collection update video. I think those are always fun. And they're also a cool like timestamp for me. Like if I look back at the first collection update video that I did back when I first started my channel, my collection is wildly different now. And it's only been 9 months, right? And even I did another one a few months after that, and now compared to then, it's also wildly different. Like it's flowing and changing, and I feel like it kind of gets at these points, my collection, where like I'll build it to a certain extent, and not much will be falling off of it, and it'll be building and building and building. And at first it was like that jump from 20 to 30 knives. I was like building and building and building, and then once I got beyond 30, then I was like, all right, I gotta kind of stay at 30. And now, like from 30 to 40 knives, I've kind of been like knocking off fluff at and around and over 40, and I'm kind of at like that solid 40 where now there's not much that I want to get rid of, and I have to start changing my definition of what I'm willing to get rid of so I can keep evolving the collection. And that's like this natural kind of process that happens with it, and I really enjoy looking at that over time. Because if I look at that first collection video that I posted, there were a lot of knives in my collection in that video that I considered kind of off bounds for getting rid of, that aren't with me anymore. There are some that are like sentimental pieces, like knives my dad gave to me or my wife gave to me back when we were dating or years ago, and like those knives, because they're like gift knives and they have a sentimental value to them, I don't even look at them as like a chess piece in my collection, right? But everything else is a chess piece in my collection. Even my favorite knife, the Koenig Arius, if it came down to it, if I had a shot today to trade that knife for an OZ Roosevelt, which I can't get my hands on but want so bad, I would do it because I could get another Arius. I know that. It would be a strategic move, right? I don't want to get rid of my Arius, but there are certain, like everything kind of has a price except for those sentimental ones, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And then the other thing too is like, my standards change constantly as well. As I get more and more like better and better knives, the stuff that I thought was like pinnacle, like cream of the crop, amazing part of my collection months ago is now like a mid-level collection piece. And it just like, I like that evolution. I like seeing what I consider the top of my collection bump down because I found things that are even better. That's a really cool thing to me. So right now where I'm at with gear, I feel like my kind of median, not to sound snobbish or anything like that, but my median value of the knives that I appreciate the most, like if I look at my top 10 of knives, I did a video recently on my top 10, and if I did it today it might even be changed up a little bit because it's been a little bit and I've gotten so many new things since, but if I look at what my top 10 knives are right now, the median price point on it is probably like $300 or $350, which is crazy because if I had done it back when I started my channel, the median price point on it, like if you added them all up and divided them by 10, right, probably been more like $200 or $250. And so it's just that that target has moved, and I've found myself getting more into the kind of the minutia of the things that I didn't always value in knives. Like there's a famous, at this point, Nick Shabazz video about the law of diminishing returns in knives. And I've done a video about knife values myself before and where I kind of think that line is. And if you'd asked me like a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, what I valued in a knife, it would be different than what I say today. Like it's becoming more and more important to me who the designer is and what they're like and what their vision for the knife is and what their story behind it is. And there's depth to this hobby that I'm getting to that's different from where I started. But I also still have so much like respect for the people who are so utilitarian in their approach to this hobby, and the guys who it's all about performance. Like I find it very hard for me to argue any kind of case against that because I get it, and performance is still really important to me on knives, but I'm just getting to a place where like it's not all that's important. And I think part of where that shift started to happen was that I started to feel like I had all of my like function use cases for knives filled. Like if I think of any realistic task that I'm going to be required to do, normal use or emergency or otherwise, with any folding knife that I own, I feel like I've got a knife that can handle just about everything at this point. If I need total corrosion resistance with still a very solid built good knife, I've got it. If I need ridiculously robust folder with crazy strong lock and really tough steel, I've got it. If I need slim and slicey, I've got it. If I need, like, you name it, I've got knives in my collection, and usually more than one, that can fit just about any realistic, real-world role that they could need to fill. And so I feel like once I started to realize that I've got all those bases covered, now it's more about, like, I don't even know if I want to say the art of it, because I'm not really into, like, art knives that are just, like, fancy Flowmascus and Mokutai and, like, Damascus blades, and that kind of stuff doesn't really interest me yet. It may later, but those things are still a little too fluffy for me. But I guess what I'm trying to say is more like the expression within knives. Like, certain designs just feel like they've got more thought put into them, and they're, I don't know, they're kind of taking you to a place when you hold them and play with them, and that might sound weird, but I get that sense out of certain knives. So yeah, my collection right now is kind of at a pretty full point. I think I'm at a spot where within the next couple of weeks I'm going to start letting go of some knives that I really love. And it's not because I don't love them still. It sounds funny to say out loud, but it'll be more so because I want to continue the journey of finding new, interesting things. And for me, monetarily, it is a necessity to let go of knives that I have right now to pursue knives that I want next. Even just today, as of when I'm recording this, I shipped out my Chavez 229, which if you watched my reviews on that knife, I loved that knife in a way that I wasn't really expecting to, because I didn't like the 228 nearly as much as I liked the 229, and I think it helped that I got the blackout version, and it looked so cool, and it just had such a vibe to it, and it was an interesting knife for me to have liked as much as I did, and I really didn't want to let that knife go, but I traded it for a knife that arguably is worth more than it, although original retail it was worth less, but they're like really hard to get, and they're going for a lot right now. It was to a buddy who has, since the moment that I got that Chavez, which was affectionately nicknamed Death Skull because my 5-year-old daughter called it that when she saw it first, ever since I got Death Skull, my buddy Bob, who I talk to a lot in a group chat that we're in together, he wanted it so bad. And when he got the knife that I ended up trading it for, it was like, I guess Bob's going to get it, because I'm going to tell him that if he's willing to trade me that, then I'll let go of Death Skull. And it's not because I didn't love Death Skull. It's because, like, for me to hold on to that knife indefinitely at this point in how I treat my collection would be the wrong move, because I'd be cheating myself out of trying something new that might be amazing, and I might like even more, or I might like less, and then I keep that ball rolling, and I sell that or trade it into another thing. And it's just that cycle that for me is part of the fun of the hobby, and it's cyclic. It really is. Like, it comes in ebbs and flows, because there are times when I'm just focused on buying a lot of new stuff. And then once I've kind of got it all there, I've kind of hoarded it together, then I start, like, thinning it out and figuring out what I'm willing to let go of. And then it's like, usually there's a couple of core pieces from a buying cycle that stay and become like new keepers, and the rest kind of have to float away for me to get that next lump and then get to what's really good in it. And oftentimes there are a lot of knives that I genuinely like in just about every way, and there's nothing wrong with, and that if I were to delete my knife Instagram and my YouTube and just have my knives to myself forever, I'd be happy with. Like, they'd be good knives. But I like the chase. I like finding new stuff and trying new things, and right now there's a bunch of knives that are kind of like on my radar that I'd like to get. Some of which I'll have to get secondary now, because when they launched, I didn't have the money to buy because I'd been buying so many other things, and so I need to start freeing some of that up and liquefying the collection so that I have the ability to hunt new things. Another interesting thing, a few people have asked me recently, and I've seen a number of other YouTubers do videos on the subject of like, what's your hit list for 2021? And it's interesting for me because the way that I buy knives or trade for knives or obtain new knives is, I don't want to say haphazard. Like, oftentimes there are knives that I've wanted for years that I finally get. Other times it's like very spur of the moment that I'll learn about a knife for the first time, and then the next day I'll find that I've got one on the way. Or like there's no real list for me very often. There's just kind of like at back of my mind knives that I've always thought were interesting but have yet to experience. And then I'm always just kind of surveying on Instagram and Facebook and on YouTube, and I'm just kind of keeping an eye out for teasers of upcoming knives or launches of new knives that have just come out. And I guess haphazard kind of is the right word, because sometimes if I find, hey, I just was able to sell a knife that I have had for a while and I got $500 out of it. Now it's sitting in my PayPal and I have $500 to do some damage with. There's part of me sometimes that wants to just go to a retailer and purchase something I've been wanting to get for a while. But then there's a strong chance that I'm going to happen to be scrolling through Instagram while that money's in my account before I've gone and spent it on something, and I'm going to see something that just came out. Or I'm going to see a used knife that I've wanted for years and isn't even made anymore and it's for sale. Or like, so many things can happen each time that I have that knife money. And I think the cool thing about that is that there are so many knives that I want still. Like, even though I've kind of refined my taste to a certain degree, and I've gotten pretty good at knowing what I'm going to like and what I'm not going to like, although there are times I'm surprised, the fact that there's still so many knives that I really want, and that I'm curious about, and that I'd be willing to spend my money on, or to sell knives that I already have and like to get, like, that's a cool thing to me. And I like that I haven't gotten to the bottom yet of what there is in this world. Another interesting thing I've been thinking about recently, it was a couple months ago now that I was at California Custom Knife Show, and I was hanging out there with a number of different people, which was a lot of fun for me to see. Some people that I'd met a couple of times in person, and some that I hadn't met in person at all yet, but had talked to and had kind of gotten to know from the community. And one of the guys that I was with for a good part of the show was my buddy Nick from Niche Designs, and he's become a friend. We've met up a couple times in person, and we spent part of the show also hanging out with Alex from Alex's Knife Box. And I'm on the Sharp Talk podcast with Alex, and we've done a video together. I took him up to my secret hiking spot, and he's a cool dude. We've hung out. And so with each of those guys, I'd hung out with them, and both of them are pretty into custom knives. Like, I think Nick that day was carrying his Tough, which is a really cool build. I think that's what it was. And Alex is always showing off crazy customs, and he's like on people's books for ridiculous stuff all the time. He's always talking about what he's got being built and what's coming up, and that's a different type of knife collecting than I do, right? But it was interesting because I remember Nick specifically asking me, like, are you gonna get into customs? Do you plan on that? And my answer, and I keep kind of coming back to this and feeling like I did then, I'm not ready yet, because I haven't gotten to the bottom of the production side yet. There are still production knives that are nicer than I've gotten to. And to a lot of people just starting out in the hobby, my collection probably seems kind of insane. But then I know people who have collections that make my collection seem like nothing, right? It's also relative. And I feel like as much as I'm interested in custom knives and that whole realm, I'm not ready yet to be done with the segment that I'm in. And so I think 2021 is going to be kind of a fun dive into a lot more of the realm that I've kind of already been in, but just getting to where maybe I'll feel like I've hit the bottom of it. Maybe I never will, but I'm looking forward to just trying a lot of new stuff, and stuff from designers that interest me and makers that interest me, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Not that I'm opposed to getting custom stuff. I've had a few custom pieces, mostly fixed blades more than folders, but I'm not opposed to customs. I'm not going to say I'll say no to them, but hopefully that comes across. So I guess that's kind of a snapshot of where I'm at for 2021 just beginning, and with the podcast just beginning. You can look forward to there being some level of regularity. I've yet to define 100% what that will be, but I'm thinking at least twice a month. Maybe I'll do weekly. We'll see what I can make time for on top of making all the content I already make and trying to be a dad and a husband at the same time. But I'm looking forward to this new kind of venture of the podcast and having another outlet, because it's like I said, I like opportunities to formulate my own thoughts and to feel like I have a forum to do it. And so I'm going to enjoy this. And I look forward to the conversations and the things that I'll learn too. One of the things I envy most about Joe Rogan is how much he gets to learn by sitting across the table from these absolute experts in so many fields and just interesting people and the stories he gets to hear. And I love being a fly on the wall for it, but he has an advantage of being there, being the one asking the questions and getting to feel that. And so even though I'm not going to be sitting across the table with people, it will probably for the most part just be in a virtual format that we'll be talking to each other. I'm really looking forward to the knowledge that I'll gain, and I think I'm going to find it really interesting. So hopefully you will as well. This has been episode number 1, I suppose, and there are many more to come. Many of them are probably going to get really lengthy. This one's pretty short because it's just me kind of introing it, but there will be there will be no time limit. I think that's going to be pretty important to me. If people want to talk for hours with me, then we'll probably talk for hours. And just like on my videos, if you don't like it, you can fast forward or you can skip it. There's no gun to your head. I'm not making you listen, so joke's on you. Anyways, thanks guys. I'll see you on the next one.